Jungkook. Everyone says that, but everyone leaves wine. You will too. She reached for his hand and curled her fingers around his, and for once he didn't pull away. She held on like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Jungkook. I don't know how to do this, how to trust someone enough to actually care. His jaw clenched. Jungkook. I've spent my entire life making sure I don't have anything to lose, and now suddenly I have everything to lose. She stepped even closer, their hands still intertwined. Fine. Well, you're stuck with us, whether you like it or not. He scoffed. Jungkook. Yeah, well, apparently. His gaze flickered to her stomach for a split second. Fine noticed it and said, it's going to work out. If you maybe don't yell at me every time I breathe wrong. A tiny smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Jungkook. You do have an annoying habit of breathing too loudly. Fine. And you have an annoying habit of being a complete jerk. But I'll still give you a chance. You're lucky that it's me who's your wife. He looked at her like he couldn't quite believe it, like the idea of forgiveness and second chances was unknown to him. Jungkook. You really are stubborn, you know that? Fine. Learn from the best. He laughed despite himself. The silence stretched between them, and then, suddenly, her stomach started making loud noises. Jungkook. You're hungry? Fine, looking away from embarrassment. You act as if you don't know I'm hormonal and hungry every other minute. Jungkook. Really? Fine. What? Hungry? Always. But if you're asking about the other thing, yeah, it's been rough. Jungkook. Why didn't you tell me? Fine. Because you act like I'm the enemy half the time, and the other half, you just avoid me like the plague. He flinched, but instead of replying back, he just looked miserable. Jungkook. I'm sorry. Her heart twisted painfully. Fine. I know. She could see he was struggling to find something to say. Anything. But words weren't his strong suit. So instead, he just held her hand a little tighter. Jungkook. Well, let's go get something to eat. She smiled, her heart warm, as she looked at him, and nodded before they made their way to the kitchen. Jungkook's hand still wrapped around hers, like he was afraid she would disappear the moment he let go. Even when he ordered the food, before opening the bag of their ordered food, his eyes went on the cold, untouched plate on the table that she didn't eat earlier because of him. He scratched the back of his neck, looking almost boyish. Jungkook. Let's eat now, he said, forcing a smile. Fine, nodded fast. Don't judge me now. I'm really hungry, she said and started eating the pizza, stuffing her mouth even when it was full. He laughed while adoring her. Jungkook. Calm down. It's not running away. She didn't reply, only ate with silence while he watched her. Jungkook. Right. If falling for you is a mistake, I will accept it, even if it kills me. He cracked a smile, his shoulders easing just a little, and then somehow he was at peace. Why? Why aren't you eating? She asked with her stuffed mouth. She took the slice of pizza in her hand and put it in front of his mouth. Fine. Taste it. His eyes widened suddenly as he hesitated for a second before finally taking a bite. Jungkook. This It's not as terrible as I thought it would be. Wine. Wow. Thank God you like something. She laughed, and his eyes softened. Fine. Now finish your food before it gets cold, because I'm definitely not cooking for you if you waste it. He chuckled, saying, Yes, ma'am. She chopped on her beer as soon as she heard those words, eyes widening as she cupped and cupped, splattering the beer on her clothes. Jungkook looking at her with utmost worry. Are you okay? He held her hand with both hands and again asked her, What happened? You're okay? Her cheeks got tomato red by the closeness between them. She quickly snatched her hand away, pretending to look for the tissue paper. Fine, I'm fine, she said with an awkward smile, and hurriedly wiped her clothes and her mouth while he looked at her in confusion. Her cheeks were still glowing pink, her eyes trying desperately to avoid his. His worry faded into a soft chuckle as he watched her wipe her lips with the napkin, missing a tiny drop that was left on the corner of her mouth. Jungkook, you, missed a spot. Fine frowned, dabbing her lips with the napkin. Fine. Where? Jungkook shook his head. No, it's here. Let me. He didn't think much of it when he reached over, gently brushing his thumb at the corner of her lips. But the moment his skin touched hers, everything else just disappeared. His thumb stayed there, and then he realized how close they were, how her breath hitched just a little at his touch. He wanted to get back, but his gaze caught hers, and suddenly his hand wouldn't move. They felt it at that moment, the sudden tightening in the chest, the heat crawling up the neck and down the spine. Jungkook, you really have no idea what you do to me. And then he closed the distance before he could second guess himself. His lips pressed against hers with a desperation he hadn't even realized he had been holding back. She gasped in shock, complete, utter shock, but she quickly gained back control, and her hands clutched his shirt instinctively. He kissed her harder, his other hand slipping around her waist and pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. He deepened the kiss, pouring all his frustration, his longing, his fear into it, and she responded with just as much desperation. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, faces inches apart, eyes locked and dazed. His fingers were still in her hair. Jungkook, you're gonna be the death of me, fine. Fine let out a shaky laugh, her fingers still gripping his shirt. Fine, likewise. He chuckled, and for once there was no anger. And damn it, he wanted to see her, to know her, all of her, even the parts that terrified him. Without another word, he captured her lips again, this time slower, softer, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her, the taste of her, like he was done running away. Jungkook, not giving up, huh? Why? Believe it or not, I'm kinda stubborn when it comes to you. Jungkook huffed a weak laugh. his thumb brushing against her shoulder absent-mindedly. Fine. You're stuck with me, John Jungkook. And him. She nodded towards her stomach, smiling. Fear and curiosity flickered in her eyes. Jungkook, how do you know it's a boy? Fine chuckled. I don't. Just a feeling, I guess. Maybe it's a girl. Either way, they're just already as stubborn as you. Jungkook smiled. Right. Because if this kid ends up being anything like you, I'm doomed. Fine. And if they end up being like you, then we're both doomed. They both laughed.